Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to DNB Nor and our Marble Hall, which was previously our head office and dates back to 1925. As you can see, we're back in those days when banking was slightly more formal and our employees served the customers from behind high marble counters, as you can see here on the side. I must say I like the fact that we are more in level with the customers today, both through the way we meet them in our branches and the services we offer through different digital channels. However, we are still able to use this marble hall for different events, like inviting school classes to learn more about banking. We have customers here on different seminars. And last but not least, we have the opportunity to host a seminar like this, New African Connections. For more than 5 years, DNB Nor and Care Norway have worked together on a microfinance project in Rwanda. When discussing how to continue our fruitful cooperation, we decided to prepare a seminar on microfinance to raise the awareness of investment opportunities in developing countries. Quite early in our planning process, we found equal interest of this subject with Norfund and the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Therefore, I stand here, welcome you all on behalf of all the 4 organizations. In our press release for this conference, we stated that quite a few African countries have an explosive economic growth and increased investments. At the same time, innovation within technology opens new possibilities for better health, safer money transfer, more savings, better access to loan and insurance among poor people in Africa. This is the essence of what we want to discuss over these 2 days here in Oslo. I am delighted that we have such distinguished speakers from many countries and companies to share their experiences and ideas with us. Especially, we're trying to focus on the partnership between business, governments, and NGOs. The potential in this partnership is enormous, and I'm convinced that this will create new markets and innovation, which again will benefit so many people in developing countries. So once again, a warm welcome to you all, and I really hope that you will have some interesting days with us exploring new African connections. So it is a great honor for me to introduce to you the first speaker of the seminar, His Royal Highness Crown Prince Haakon of Norway.
Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. First, I would like to thank the organizers for putting this seminar together. It's an important topic, and I think all of us that are here will learn from the deliberations. Also, I would like to mention the United Nations Foundation Board. It is quite rare to have so many prominent and respected and impressive individuals amongst us. So I just want to say that I think all of us here are very privileged to be able to hear some of you speak a bit later on. Economic growth and innovative technology create new opportunities all over the world. So also in African countries. Increasingly, governments and companies discover business potential at the African continent. The Crown Princess and I had the opportunity to see some inspiring examples for ourselves when we visited Ghana together with the Norwegian Minister of Development, Mr. Erik Solheim, in April. We need to make sure that whole populations can benefit from these new developments. Also, the worst-off groups, the marginalized, should reap the positive effects of economic growth and technological innovation. That is the best way to create stable, peaceful societies over time. Partnership between the public and the private sector is key. Global cooperation through the UN, democratic governance, international support, investments, and innovation are all crucial components. Involving communities and civil society who know the local context well, is necessary to develop mutual beneficial partnerships. New technology, in particular within mobile software and systems, is already making its impact on various communities in Africa. In Rwanda, SMS is used to make sure that women can have safe pregnancies. In Kenya, mobile phone banking gives poor people access to safe financial services. During this conference, representatives from governments, companies, and civil societies will present inspiring success stories from such partnerships. I hope that the conference will foster even more innovation and inspiring cooperation and show that it is possible to do well economically by doing good for people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Crown Prince Haakon, for these words at the beginning of our very special high-level seminar and panel. Your Royal Highness, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Einar Lunde. I'm going to be your moderator this afternoon, and I feel very privileged indeed. For 40 years, I've had another privilege of presenting news on Norwegian television screens, the evening news on the main channel, NRK, but also I've had the chance of being Africa correspondent for a number of years. So that's taken me to Africa. Now it's more or less 70 times. And in fact, I was in Africa just a few weeks ago when I landed in Juba, exactly 4 weeks ago. And that was about 30 years since I was there. Nothing had changed. A few more buildings, yes. A little bit of tarmac on the roads, on the main roads of Juba. But other than that, very, very little had changed. Nevertheless, there was one big change, and that has to do with this conference. As we had crossed the River Nile, the beautiful River Nile, and drove eastwards towards Torit, the capital of Eastern Equatorial Province in southern Sudan, we, time and time again, came across construction sites. Not maintenance, road maintenance, or road construction. That would have been highly necessary indeed. Not drilling of wells and water drilling, which was in the 70s and 80s throughout Africa. No. It was construction sites with engineers building masts or towers for mobile telephones, cell phones, in the middle of absolutely nowhere. You couldn't see not even a village in the neighborhood. And as we were driving through village after village, in between the two cools, people, very, very, without any clothes at all, nearly, they were going there and they had no electricity, no public amenities. They were talking in their mobile telephones in the middle of the bush. And outside the little small, the town shop, lying on the ground, 2 solar panels. Enough to charge all the batteries for the mobile telephones on that village. So there's a big, big change. I couldn't believe my eyes coming back after 30 years, and this has only happened the last 10, 15 years in Africa. It goes so very, very, very fast. Now, indeed, this has to do with new African connections. It's got to do with partnership of innovation between the public and private sectors in Africa. And this links up with the global strategy initiated by the present Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, to help improve the health of women and children in the poorest countries. And this morning, we received a very special message for this conference from Ban Ki-moon in New York, and I'm going to read it to you all. Message to the New African Connections Conference, co-hosted by CARE Norway, DNB Nord, Norfund, and the Government of Norway in Oslo, June 21st. As demonstrated again with organizing of this conference, Norway has been a strong leader in support of women's and children's health. The country's creativity and commitment in using technology and finance to address some of the world's most pressing health challenges for some of the world's poorest and most vulnerable people has set a high standard for other countries to follow. I welcome your steadfast dedication to this agenda. In September 2010, the United Nations launched Every Woman, Every Child, a multi-stakeholder effort to advance the global strategy for women's and children's health. The world has recognized that saving the lives of millions of women and children requires action by all sectors. While governments remain central actors, the private sector and civil society are indispensable for delivering services and results. Partnerships that capitalize on our respective strengths must be the cornerstone of our efforts. Over the past year, we have witnessed significant momentum on three crucial fronts. One, increased training and deployment of midwives is allowing more women to give birth safely to healthy children, as I saw firsthand during a visit to Ethiopia and Nigeria. Two, an accountability framework was launched recently aimed at ensuring that money is spent wisely and that commitments translate into tangible improvements. And thirdly, 16 new countries have made commitments in support of the global strategy only last May, and many more are expected in the coming months. As we continue to build support for every woman, every child, innovation will be among the keys to success. And I welcome this conference's focus on improving health outcomes through new ideas, technologies, and partnerships. The United Nations will continue to do its part, and I look forward to continuing this work together. Please accept my best wishes for a productive gathering. Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations. Now, a vital partner in this partnership of innovation and connections is the United Nations Foundation. Established in 1998 after a formidable donation of $1 billion by Ted Turner, it's a public charity that seeks to broaden support for the UN. It is intended to encourage other donors to support sustainable development, new technology, women and child issues, to mention but a few. Thus, the UN Foundation has been involved in a number of global campaigns, always in partnerships with other agencies. And as we've heard, these last few days, founder Ted Turner and his board members have been meeting here for their biannual meeting in Oslo, which incidentally we who live and work here in Oslo are very, very proud of and very thankful for. Our high-level panel here today consists of 3 members of the UN Foundation board. These are, beside Ted Turner himself, former Secretary General of the United Nations and Nobel Peace Prize laureate Mr. Kofi Annan, and former Prime Minister of Norway and Director General of the World Health Organization, WHO, Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland. And we give them a warm applause as they take their seats on the podium. Now, I'll get back to each one of you in a little while. First, I want to introduce to all of you the other members of the United Nations Foundation Board who have been here in Oslo these last few days. And we'll give them a round of applause as I've finished presenting them. First, it's Igor Ivanov, a former Russian foreign minister. Yeah. Okay, Yang Ming, director of the Institute of International Relations at Beijing University. Hisashi Owada from Japan, who is the president of the International Court in The Hague. Emma Rothschild, she's a professor at Harvard University. She's from the UK, by the way. Timothy Birth, Timothy Birth is from the United States. He is president of the United Nations Foundation and Better World Fund. And Andrew Young, also from the United States, chairman of Good Works and former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. I don't know if you remember back at Kilimanjaro Hotel in March 1978, as you were about to leave for Salisbury in Rhodesia, trying to persuade Ian Smith to share power. You and Cyrus Vance and David Owen, you were going in there, and you were sitting around with us journalists at the Kilimanjaro Hotel. I was one of them. Right. Okay, that was Andrew Young. And finally, Mohammed Yunus from Bangladesh, founder of Grameen Bank and Nobel Peace Prize laureate 2006. And I don't know if you remember, just after the announcement in Oslo, you had a phone call from Norwegian television, and you were interviewed live on Norwegian television. I was the one who interviewed you. Yes. Good to see you again, sir. So we wish you all welcome to Oslo. We're very honored for you to be here. All right. Now for the panel. Back in October 1981, I was a guest in the office of the Secretary General of the United Nations on the top floor of the UN building in New York. Mr. Kurt Waldheim had agreed to make a televised appeal for the upcoming television fundraising that I was co-hosting in Norway that fall. One Sunday each October, the entire nation here in Norway wakes up to an all-out dugnad, pulling together a harambe, as they say in Kiswahili, for a worthy cause, mostly for NGOs working in the poorest countries. Hundreds of millions of kroner are being raised within one single day. Now we see another kind of harambe unfolding and gaining speed. With revolutionary technology at hand, poor people of Africa are pulling themselves out of the quagmire of poverty in partnership with public and private companies. Got stuck here now. Kofi Annan, who is also the chairperson of Africa Progress Panel, wants to help this process accelerate and spread throughout the vast and beautiful continent of Africa. We look forward to his keynote speech here now. Mr. Kofi Annan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that warm introduction. Your Royal Highness, Madam Prime Minister, and our fearless Chair, Ted Turner, and all the distinguished guests in the room. It's always wonderful to be in a city where you have so many friends. Nan and I love Norway, and we love coming here. And it's also good to be here walking around with no confusion or ambiguity as to who you are and whom you're meeting. I say this because some years ago when I stepped down as Secretary General and we took a holiday in a village in Italy, Nan and I, and we wanted to stay incognito for a while and tried to stay very quiet. After a while, we got a bit bored, and I said, let's go and get newspapers. And we walked into a shop, and within minutes, a group of about 6 men standing in the corner were looking at us, and one of them broke away and made for us. And I turned to Nan and I said, oh my God, we still have a couple of weeks to go, and we've blown our cover in the village. How are we going to manage? And the fellow by then was on top of me, and he put out his hand and said, Morgan Freeman. I said, Morgan Freeman, may I have an autograph? So I said, sure. And I signed K. Freeman. He was very happy. I was very happy. And Nan turned around to me and said, and on top of it, you are today a free man. And anyway, it's really wonderful to be here. And let me thank all of you for inviting me to participate in this session, and to thank the organizers for putting it together. And I think this is a conference that can make a good contribution to our efforts to achieving the Millennium Development Goals. And I suspect you're going to have a very lively and substantive discussion over the next day or two. And honestly, I cannot imagine a better and more fitting place for this conversation than Norway. Norway, which has demonstrated strong and continuous support and involvement in driving forward progress towards the Millennium Development Goals and doing whatever it can to help uplift the poor around the world. This conference, in my judgment, is also a further proof of Norway's determination to continue to find new ways to afford the poorest and the most vulnerable with the opportunity to lead better lives. And in relation to Africa, there is no better time to bring leaders from business, government, civil society, and other innovative partners together to discuss the future of Africa. The huge opportunity and vast potential that currently exists in Africa has created a new sense of optimism. People are seeing the continent as a continent of opportunity, and the narrative around Africa's development has changed. More than ever before, companies, countries are increasingly focused not on the continent's problems, but its endless possibilities, and there is a good reason for this optimism. In the past few years, we have seen significant political developments, freer elections, fairer and better attempts by governments to improve governance, improve macroeconomic policies, and basically democratic governance is improving. Compared to other regions, Africa has weathered, I believe, the recent financial crisis quite well. In fact, IMF predicts that 7 of the 10 fastest growing economies over the next 5 to 10 years will be in Africa. And the countries they have targeted are Ethiopia, Mozambique, Tanzania, Congo, Ghana, Zambia, and Nigeria. And of course, the OECD is also anticipating that Africa will be the second fastest growing region this year. So this is some of the good news concerning the continent. Africa has also made some progress towards achieving the MDGs with better policies in place and with the support of an increasingly engaged civil society, the growth of the private sector, and openness to investments. These factors have combined to accelerate a change in perception, and more, it is obvious that Africa has the capacity to shoulder the responsibility for its own progress and development. There are, of course, many obstacles still to be overcome and areas where we are falling behind. And there is no doubt that we need to focus attention in ending the conflicts which has given the continent such a bad name. If we can resolve these conflict areas, we can then focus on the essential work of economic and social development. So despite the advances in social and economic development, we need to ensure also that the economic growth is inclusive and the benefits are shared and translated into better lives for the population, particularly those in the rural areas. And while the increasingly young and dynamic population has the potential to change the continent, it also poses a difficult task in terms of providing adequate education, health services, skills, and gainful employment. There's also a pressing need to address the shortfalls in energy, infrastructure, and worryingly in food security, food and nutrition security. In fact, most economists will tell you that the two biggest constraints, or if you wish, blocks on African development is infrastructure and energy. If you're a manufacturer and you have 90 days or 100 days of outages, how do you retain your market share? How do you assure your customers that you will deliver and deliver on time? And so this is an area where Africa has a lot to do, and I think there's lots of focus being placed on infrastructure and energy. And of course, the infrastructure also means if we are able to link up the African countries by road, by rail, we can increase trade amongst ourselves substantively. Today, only about 10% of African trade is intra-African. We deal more with outside regions than with ourselves. And if we can increase intra-African trade, we can boost trade amongst ourselves between $250 to $300 billion in a relatively short period. And of course, we also see a situation where Africa is marginalized in international affairs and decisions. It is often a subject of international debate, but that debate hardly includes Africans as participants. They talk about us, but we are not there to speak for ourselves. And I hope over time, the international system will be reformed in such a way that Africa will gain a voice. And I think the aftershocks of the last economic crisis also makes it clear that the reforms that we require, we often hear of the Security Council, is also required at the international financial institutions. And over this period, I think I can say that there has been ample evidence that with the right combination of leadership, international support, focused development programs, the huge potential of Africa can be turned into enormous gains and advances. However, many countries still face many challenges in mobilizing necessary resources to get the job done. Governments in today's climate, and here I'm referring to donor governments, have problems releasing money. They have problems explaining to their constituents and voters why they should go and spend money in distant countries when they have problems at home. Norway, of course, is an exception, and you've really decided and have maintained your support for international development efforts. But in many countries, it's an uphill battle. So if we are going to achieve all the goals we set ourselves, we need to be creative and find ways of creating partnerships. It is only by pooling our efforts and resources that collectively we can tackle some of the challenges that we face. I think it is crucial that the private sector, civil society, and governments work together in improving the conditions of the poor and achieving the MDGs. And so the idea of cross-sector collaboration has taken hold. It's not new, but today is generally accepted. I recall when I started raising this issue at the UN, and luckily Ted Turner came in and made that big gift of $1 billion. At that time, we were still debating opening the doors to private sector. We worked a bit better with civil society, but there was still some hesitation. And in fact, some ambassadors were asking the question, who gave the Secretary General the authority or the mandate to open the door to private sector and so widely also to the civil society. And yet there were things that we could not have done without the support of the civil society. The landmine ban, which was signed in Canada, we could not have done it without their support. The establishment of the International Criminal Court, we could not have done it without them. And of course, when they posed the question, I said, well, the answer is in the Charter. The Charter begins in its opening paragraph with "We, the peoples of the world." The peoples were outside the glass house in New York. They were not in the UN headquarters. So we had to reach out to them if we were going to be faithful to our own charter. So in fact, when Ted made his extraordinary gift, I thought that will settle the debate. But some ambassadors were asking me, how do we know he's not going to interfere with our decisions? He may want to take part in Security Council General Assembly decisions. I said, no, first of all, we have no procedure for that, and it's not Ted's intention. He's somebody who believes in the UN, who believes in what we are doing, who wants to make a contribution to the world. And eventually, this is what happened. But today, I'm so happy to see that not only have we embraced a partnership and accepted that we all need to work together to make this world a better place, but more and more companies are joining the fray. The UN is reaching out more and more. And there are wonderful examples of partnerships which have confirmed the belief and the trust we placed in that relationship. For example, if it hadn't been for private-public collaboration, we wouldn't have the Gavi on the vaccine, which Gro has so much to deal with Gates Foundation and others creating a fund that has invested so much in finding the right vaccines to help the sick, the poor, and the weak. If it hadn't been for that partnership, we couldn't have established the Global Fund, which has raised billions to fight HIV/AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis. And today we have over 3 million people receiving treatment with HIV/AIDS. And I think what we are seeing in Africa today, in our attempts to improve health, to improve education, to help small-scale farmers, is that technology is playing a very important role. I'm today engaged with what we call the Alliance for Green Revolution. Our effort is to work with African farmers and governments to assure their own food security. Food and nutrition security is essential, and today it's also a global problem. Food prices are rising, and it is going to continue to rise. So if we can help them to move from subsistence farming to commercial farming, produce enough for their families and sell on the market, and eventually see a situation where Africa becomes part of the global food security system through exports, we would have made a giant step forward. And we have, and here it's not just governments, but civil society organizations are extremely involved working with farmers. I think the Crown Prince mentioned the experiment in Kenya where you use mobile phone to make payments, which is the M-Pesa system. This M-Pesa has brought about 16 to 18 million people to the financial market. These are people who never would go to a bank, have never been to a bank, and the bank probably wouldn't welcome them. But they use their phones to make payments, to settle bills, and through that, they have been captured into the financial system, expanding it, and this is a system that is spreading very fast on the continent. There are other experiments. We try to set up what we call weather information for all, using the towers of the telecommunication system. The partnership was with Ericsson and other phone companies where we were going to set up weather stations on those antennas to gather weather information which will be available to farmers. And today the weather pattern has changed. The rains don't come when they were supposed to come. I've seen farmers saying, my grandfather told me this, my father told me the rain comes between February and April. This is no longer the case. And we ourselves are trying to give them new seeds which has shorter duration to mature. So the farmers also need the weather information. And hopefully the idea would be to be able to give them access to the information via telephone. And if we did that and also managed to get them insurance, whether indexed insurance for their crops, not only would they be protected, but they would also be able to raise money from the banks. We're using this new technology for telemedicine, where, as you heard, we use it for births of children. You can also use it for analysis. And there are attempts to set up lab analysis, spreading it around the country, using electronic systems to do it. And of course, long-distance learning for education. And so new technologies can help Africa frog leap some of the processes that other economies had to go through to get to where they are and still remain green. And so the innovation, not only on the ground, but the research that is going on in universities, research centers, in the corporations are extremely important for us all. And we need to take very seriously the need to green the economy. And in fact, some economists would argue that the greening of the economy and the transformation of the way we do business and produce is going to be as important as the Industrial Revolution. And those businessmen and visionary leaders who take the lead are going to get a lot out of this. And I think by doing that and making the inventions also available to the poor, we will be able to do something about our concern with the environment. Because climate change is an all-encompassing threat. It's a threat to our source of clean drinking water, threat to our health as weather gets warmer, diseases like malaria spreads faster, and it is also something that can lead to tensions on scarce resources that societies need. So we need to take that extremely seriously. So let me conclude my opening remarks by saying that I think it is extremely important that we understand that the types of problems we are facing today cannot be tackled by governments or private sector or civil society alone, and that we need to work together to tackle them. Yes, governments have their responsibility, which they cannot shirk. Governments have to come up with the right regulatory environment to allow private sector to get on with this work. Right environment to release the energy and the creativity of their own people. And when I talk of the right environment, I'm not talking only of financial and economic rules. I think we have a tendency when we are assessing the health of nation, what is a healthy democratic nation, we tend to focus sometimes too much on stability, peace and stability, and on economic development and growth. We often forget the third pillar, which is equally important, perhaps even more important, respect for rule of law and human rights. Because if you do not build society on those three pillars, development, security, and rule of law and human rights, you have a wobbly. And we've seen it. How many of us in this room, if anybody had asked in October or November last year to comment on Tunisia, I think the reactions have been, it's a great country, I've been there for holidays, it's beautiful beaches, it's safe, you are under no threat, everything runs well. Forgetting that, yes, it was stable, economically they were doing reasonable, but it was built on sand. If you don't have rules and respect for human rights, any major thing can knock you off. And this is what we have seen. And so I think we need to really do whatever we can to encourage societies built on those three pillars. I would pause here and we'll have a chance to have a conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kofi Annan, for your keynote speech. We are going to proceed. We're going to have remarks now from the two other panelists. I remember there was one thing in particular that struck me when I, in 1999, visited the CNN headquarters, the impressive headquarters, actually, in Atlanta, Georgia. The head of the news department, who was my host, told me something I never heard in my television career before. He said, whenever we change formats or prepare a new program, we always invite a panel of ordinary viewers and also psychologists. We've never done that in NRK, but they did it at CNN. And he said, he explained, for hours we expose them to different kinds of lighting, to different kinds of colors, to different kinds of sound pitches, according to the hour of the day or night. Because we have one single purpose in mind. We want to meet the viewer and satisfy his needs at any one hour of the day and night, all in the spirit of our founder, Ted Turner. You can have all the new technology in the world, but unless you tailor-make it to reach your viewers, it will all be a waste of time and money, said the chief of the CNN News in 1999. Ladies and gentlemen, the founder of the CNN is at it again. He has already gone global television-wise. These days, he and his UN Foundation are going global with new technology to fight diseases and poverty to improve the lives of women and children in new African connections. Ted Turner, the floor is yours.
Well, it's great to be here. I've been here many times, and I used to race against who used to be the Crown Prince, and King Olaf out at Hanko came over here. I raced sailboats for a long time. But I thought the thing I could discuss a lot of different things, and we talk a good bit about the foundation. But I thought you'd enjoy the story of how I did business in Africa. And we had a meeting at CNN. When CNN started, we were just in the United States. We just bought a satellite, rented the space on a satellite to cover the United States. But the satellite signal fell into Canada and into Cuba. And Fidel Castro invited me down, and he said, Ted, he said, we got to be good friends. He said, but I didn't even know him then. He said, Ted, CNN, he said, you really got something. He said, when I read about it in the paper that you were going to go on the satellite, and I had my communications people figure out that the signal would be available in Cuba, he said, I had to put a satellite dish in to pick it up, because he said, I got to know what's going on in the world. You know, I'm at war over in Africa, and I've got to see what's going on. And he said, it's really helpful. He said, for the night, he said, the night that Anwar Sadat was shot, he said, I came into my office and spent the whole night there watching the television to see what was happening and whether Egypt was going to go to war with Israel, what was going to. He said, I had to do it. He said, it's very difficult for me because, you know, the United States has tried to assassinate me 20 times. And he said, I never spend the night in the same place twice. He says, because I think they might kill me, you know, like we did Osama bin Laden. And he said, so I moved to different places. And he said, I can't afford a satellite dish at every one. So he said, when I really, he said, I've got one in my office. I said, when there's really big news, he said, I have to go spend the night in my office. That's it. He said, he said, all the world leaders have got to have CNN. So when I went back to Atlanta, I said, we're going to go cover the whole world. But Africa is kind of isolated from a communication satellite. And I checked, and the U.S. government did not have, there was no satellite, American satellite, that covered Africa. The Russians, the Soviet Union had one because they were communicating with their troops in Angola. They had to have communication. So I said, well, I was doing a lot of business. I already made friends over there with everybody. And I went over and I met the head of the satellite division for the Soviet Union. And I said, I want to use your satellite to go to Africa. He said, what? An American newscast on my satellite, my communist satellite? He said, you must be crazy. I said, how much do you want to charge me? He said, it'd be at least $100,000 a month. I said, I'll write you a check. And this is, but first I went back to my brain trust, the top executives at CNN, and we'd have these little conferences, whether we're going to do this or do that. And you could do this in your business too. You know, you have your little board of people there. And I said, we're going to go to Africa. They said, there's not even, they just all laughed. They said, what do you mean go to Africa? We'll lose our butt there. They said, they don't even have television in Africa. The hell, they don't even have electricity. I said, but the leaders do. And I said, they're going to need CNN. I said, already Africa's got a lot of poverty. It's the poorest continent on earth. And I said, there's nothing worse than being, if we give this information, and instantaneous information, what's happening to stocks and bonds and markets and gold and silver prices, and Africa doesn't get it till a day later. I said, how would you like to be a day late all the time on what's going on in the world? You'd be out of business. You'd be out of business because everything is instantaneous. You've got to have it right now. In fact, if you have the information, for instance, if you have tomorrow's stock prices, you can buy today. If you know what's going on, if you know what horse is going to win the race tomorrow, you know, you can bet on him today and you win, you know. So, in fact, information is power. Somebody said that once. So anyway, I said, we're gonna do it. And they said, well, and the communist satellite, the guy called me up, he said, I checked with the Politburo, and they said, okay. And they said, if you run bad stories about us, we may block them out. I said, you're not going to block out our stories. They said, okay. Anyway, they never blacked out a single story. And it worked. And it cost $1 million a year to rent the satellite the first year. And we made a deal. And it was apartheid back then. This was in the early 80s. And it was apartheid, so I didn't put my bureau in South Africa where all the other networks had their bureaus, BBC, CBS, they were all there. I went up to Kenya, to Nairobi, and we put our bureau in Black Africa, by God, to start out with. But SABC, the South African Broadcasting Company, wanted to use CNN excerpts in their local newscasts. And we worked out a deal with them where they'd pay us $2 million a year for the right to use just the excerpts. This was just in Johannesburg and Cape Town. We had the whole continent to sell to still. All the hotels, and there wasn't any cable then, and there wasn't any satellite, but we were ahead of everything. But at any rate, we were making $1 million a year before we even started. How about that? So you could do goddamn anything. You know, if I could do that, you can do it too. You can make a lot of money down there. And I think solar panels, I thought about that a long time ago. We're at the UN, we're going to try and get electricity to everybody in Africa. And we're going to probably do it with solar panels on every little hut down there, because if you don't have electricity, your kids can't do their homework at night. It's hard to do work by fire, for God's sakes. I mean, fire's not as good as electricity. You know, otherwise we wouldn't have even needed to worry with electricity. And you can't run a television set with fire either. God bless you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Tedson. Information is power, and you can make money in Africa. Indeed. Going back to Africa, though, back in 1984, I found myself in a huge, big office in Kenya, the office of Mr. Mustafa Tolba, the Director General of UNEP, the United Nations Environment Program at Gigiri in Nairobi. But Mr. Tolba himself, he was not there. Absolutely not. He had invited the person who, a few months earlier, had been appointed by the UN Secretary General to head an independent commission on environment and development, to use his office to rest a little bit and to receive guests. She received one guest. That was the Africa correspondent of the Norwegian Radio and Broadcasting, me. So we had a very good time together, Mrs. Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland and myself, at Mr. Tolba's office. It was at a very crucial moment in the history, very short history of the Commission, whether the Commission would retain its status as independent, which was highly important for the outcome of the Commission, or merely become part of the UNEP portfolio and perhaps be forgotten in the UNEP archives. Her speech in the UNEP executive in the afternoon will be very, very crucial. After lunch, the audience of the executive heard Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland deliver one of her very best speeches ever, and she won the day. 3 years later, the UN General Assembly in New York received the famous report on sustainable development, one of the most important reports ever in the history of the UN. So, Dr. Brundtland, I see kind of a line going through your international engagements over the years, from environment to development, to health and development as Director General of the WHO, and now technology and development with focus on health issues. Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland, we welcome you.
Thank you very much. It occurred to me that it's not just technology that really works. It's people with innovative thoughts and the spirit, like we heard from Ted Turner. Yes. So, but thank you to all of you for joining us on this discussion on innovation in global health and how we can best come together to help us meet the health-related Millennium Development Goals in Africa. For 5 years, I had the good fortune of leading the World Health Organization at a time of growing interest and rapid innovation in global health issues. We came together as a global community to establish the Millennium Development Goals, and of course, with Kofi Annan, where he was at the same time, this was instrumental. We created 2 new catalytic financial institutions, Gavi, and the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. Since that time, we have made considerable progress. Cut the childhood mortality rate by 1/3, HIV infections down 17%, and more women have access to skilled birth attendance for healthy delivery than ever before. But our work is not done. Approximately 8 million children under 5 still die each year, largely from preventable diseases. More than 200 million women who need access to family planning do not have it. In September 2010, the Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, launched a new global strategy for women and children's health designed to redouble our collective efforts to meet the health-related MDGs and to accelerate progress. Overall, the contributors committed more than $40 billion in new resources, with the potential to save lives of 16 million women and children under 5. So innovation will be key to delivering on the commitments made in the global strategy. This conference is an important step in identifying and catalyzing further innovation. We look forward to hearing from many partners in the private and the public sectors. 3 of the things that will be discussed in the coming days stem from areas of engagement by the United Nations Foundation itself. After a decade-long boom in financing for global health, funding levels are now beginning to taper off. But one recent innovation in global health financing, the Pledge Guarantee for Health, can help us meet the challenge of delivering more value for money and increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of each aid dollar or crown. Through the new transactions, health supplies can be procured up to 8 months faster, and commodity premiums are reduced by up to 83%. Pledge Guarantee for Health was piloted in December 2010 for the purchase and distribution of 800,000 anti-malaria bed nets in Zambia. It provided a 50% guarantee to Stanbic Bank Zambia, which enabled the bank to extend financing to the government of Zambia in advance of an anticipated World Bank emergency loan. The government then contracted UNICEF to procure and distribute the nets 6 months ahead of schedule, and importantly, therefore, before the potentially deadly rainy season. This transaction alone will avert up to 100,000 cases of malaria, saving lives and treatment costs while increasing supply chain efficiency. Now, mobile health has the ability to, we heard about the mobile phones all around Africa. They have the ability to bridge gaps in supply chain and health service delivery to the furthest reaches of wireless networks and devices in underserved communities around the world. From 2005 to 10, the number of mobile phone subscribers in the developing world more than tripled, from 1.2 billion to 3.8 billion. Currently, projects in more than 100 countries are exploring the use of mobile phones to achieve better health. The mHealth Alliance, hosted by the UN Foundation, works to catalyze public-private partnerships that will advance the use of mobile technology for health in a sustainable and scalable way. You will hear about one of its innovations, Health Unbound, or HUB, in tomorrow's afternoon session. Now, exposure to smoke from traditional cook stoves and open fires, the primary means of cooking and heating for nearly 3 billion people in the developing world, causes 1.9 million premature deaths annually, including more than 800,000 deaths in young children. The Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves is a new public-private initiative led by the United Nations Foundation to save lives, improve livelihoods, empower women, combat climate change by creating a thriving global market for clean and efficient cooking solutions. As both the mHealth Alliance and Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves demonstrate, collaboration among the world's health and development technical experts, donor and recipient governments, private foundations, and civil society is the way to ensure that innovation is fostered, that it is developed, and that it is delivered to benefit the health of millions. So these are some of the remarks that I would like to share with you, because you are coming back to several of these issues in the coming day, and we are really grateful that you all have come here to share knowledge, experience, so that we can move those connections forward even more quickly. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland. And I think we have actually a little token of our appreciation for each one of you after your remarks. No, wait, that's after the question, sorry. It's a bit premature. I'm so preoccupied with these gifts not to forget them. Now it's question times, ladies and gentlemen. It's question time. This is a practical workshop. Everybody is supposed to participate, and you'll have the opportunity to ask the panel questions in a little while. I'll start by asking a few questions, and then I'll allow you to ask questions afterwards. So just prepare yourselves, and there will be microphones on either side as we go along, all right? First, Mr. Kofi Annan, since this is a very practical sort of workshop and seminar, what advice would you, from your point of view in Africa, give to businesses in Scandinavia who want to go in partnership with NGOs and the public sector in Africa?
I think advice I would give, first of all, is to go with an open mind. Don't go with the assumption that it's a continent that is lost, a continent that is full of conflict. There is a tendency in some parts of the world to view Africa as if it were one country and not a country of, not a continent of 53 countries, soon to be 54, with Southern Sudan. And there are some countries doing extremely well, given what the list I gave you. There are others that will be doing better than they are doing now. And there are lots of opportunities in Africa. You should look to partner with the local people to be able to leave something behind. You have bright young men and women who have studied and worked in the US, in Europe, and others who are going back ready to make contribution. The old Africa of leaders who do not want to work with the private sector is gone, do not want to work with civil society is gone, is very open. You have a robust civil society that is holding governments to account, and we're going to see more and more of that. But I think what is important is to find and to identify local partners to work with, and to ensure that whatever you're doing benefits the community, and whatever you establish is sustainable. There's no point investing quite a lot of money into something which collapses the moment you leave, or is not designed in a sustainable way.
To help the poor and make money, is that what you're saying?
I think there are many ways of helping the poor. We've talked about health issues where quite a lot of things are being done to help the poor. You can help them to manufacture things. You can teach them to fish, as it were. You can help them with farming and agriculture. You can help them with marketing ideas. You can help them access financing. There's a whole host of things that one can do in Africa that will be beneficial to the people of the continent.
On the lips of many people will be, the problem of corruption. Do you see an increase in corruption or decrease in corruption throughout Africa?
I think with the transparency that is involved, and I've talked about civil society, I mean, I can give you an example which I have lived over the last 3 years or so. When Kenya exploded in 2008, I went in there to negotiate the settlement. By then, 1,200 people had been killed, 500,000 people had been displaced. But I got in there determined to work with civil society and the government, because I didn't go there to rearrange the chairs for the political elite. So what I did was I brought in civil society, I discussed the issues with them, assured them each agreement we sign will be made public immediately, and told them, this is your agreement. You have to make sure it's implemented, and you have to make sure the politicians keep at it. They have put so much pressure on the politicians that you have no incredible civil society groups, most of them headed by women, very courageous women. And today you have 6 Kenyan politicians who are going to appear before the International Criminal Court in September, including including a prime minister, a deputy prime minister, and the son of the founding father, Uhuru Kenyatta, and head of the civil service is also on the list. And the politicians have tried everything they can to abort the trial. The people say, take them to The Hague. If you leave it to Kenyans, nothing will happen. And they are also fighting corruption very actively. And they passed a new constitution with checks and balances. And so things are improving on the continent, and the people are alert to the fact that corruption takes prosperity and food off the table that they need.
Another question I'd like to have your comment on. You know, we've seen what's happened in, you mentioned yourself, Tunisia. We've seen in Libya right now, in Egypt. They've been using the new technology and the social media to encourage and to promote the uprisings and revolutions. Do you see that that may happen also in Africa, south of the Sahara?
Let me say that what is happening in North Africa and Middle East is very important for all of us. I don't think it's going to be limited to that region. I also think it would be wrong to see it only in terms of internet revolution. These are tools. These are tools. The people were fed up. They wanted freedom. They wanted democracy. They wanted to have a say on how they are governed and who governs them. And to see that time after time, elections are rigged and are not fair, they reacted and used the tools very effectively. I see you are Emeritus here, for example, during the 89, I would say the 89 Tiananmen Square thing was a fax revolution. The young ones were sending faxes to each other, even though the radio station and the former thing was closed down, you know, but they used it as a tool. Mm-hmm. Just as you went through decolonization without faxes, and it's something that stems from within. When people get desperate, there's a kind of courage that springs from within.
Yes, but you think that would happen also south?
And I think what is happening is that people have lost their fear. Mm. And once it's happened in Egypt, Tunisia, Syria, Libya, others who are similarly placed are going to ask themselves a question, why not us? If they can do it. So the leaders must see the writing on the wall and begin to bring about changes. But it has to come on a timely basis. You know, I've maintained that reform is the solution, but reform is also the problem. How much reform? At what pace? When do you do it? Is it enough? You know, and so sometimes they are coming with too little, too late, and it's a real problem managing the change.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ted Turner, we heard your story about CNN establishing themselves in Africa, and in fact, I was a colleague of your CNN correspondent in Nairobi. But how do you see your experience from that time being sort of applied on the present situation with the new technology and with innovation? And
satellite was new technology. This isn't working. Hello?
It's working.
Somebody had a remote unit on it. New technology. But it was new technology. Satellite and cable TV, multi-channel TV, I invented that. And so I used the new technology of the satellite and cable to make a fortune. And there's all kinds of, somebody's going to make a fortune selling solar panels to people in Africa. You know, put them on the roof of their house and give them an electric light bulb and a television set. And you watch out. Somebody's going to make a lot of money.
Yes. How do you see your own foundation, the UN Foundation, participate in also improving the health for women and children?
Well, we've done a lot of work with various communications companies with the UN Foundation to get more, and with the Nuclear Threat Initiative, to get medical information to via satellite and the internet to people that are in remote places, and we put millions of dollars behind it too. So what I did is I made the money in the television business, and now I'm giving it away. In fact, I've given most of it away already, to tell you the truth.
Yes.
I've got to be careful that I have enough to be able to get my airline ticket home. So
well, we have
the new technology is always moving. At least it has for a while. I mean, if we had a worldwide nuclear war, we wouldn't have anything. So you can't say anything with absolute certainty. But if people are still alive and thinking, they'll be coming up with new ideas all the time. I mean, look at the DVD compared to the VCR. You know, How many people got a VCR? I still got one, but you can't get the movies in on a VCR anymore. It's over with. You know,
Yes.
technology's moved on, and this is one that we've lived with fire for 3 million years, and it's time to move out of fire and into solar. But fire, you heard the story about how bad the smoke is for everybody. Well, the smoke's bad for everybody. The air pollution that we're all breathing here in the cities is bad for all of us. It's killing us slowly, probably taking 4 or 5 years off everybody's life. It's time that we phased out internal combustion engines and fire. The world was lit by fire for millions of years, but it's time now that we do it with solar and wind and not pollute the air.
Indeed, and that is also applied to Africa, indeed, yes.
And people are going to make a lot of money in that, too. But energy, clean energy is going to be where the biggest fortunes are made because the whole world has to switch over to clean energy. So
Yes.
That's going to be the biggest business opportunity of the next couple of decades.
Yes. Dr. Brundtland, you talked about more value for the dollar, to be more cost efficient. Does this mean that governments in the rich part of the world and the NGOs will have to change their policies as far as development aid is concerned?
Well, I think basically this example shows how you can overcome an important bottleneck in financing, in the systems and the way that financing is delivered. I mean, this is a big problem in general in development cooperation, but also it turned out to be difficult with regard to, you know, the whole question of climate change. And in the difficult negotiations going up to Copenhagen and so on, you know, the reluctance or the kind of the period of not getting results before things happen often has to do with the way that financing is decided upon and who then is able to deliver the finance when it is needed. So that was the example of the health that I mentioned here. It's an example of how you can make changes using technology and agreeing on a certain way of moving forward. And there are many such examples that can be made to improve the way the world can move more quickly to do what is right.
But do governments and NGOs need to make new priorities in order to face the challenge of new technology innovation?
Well, I'm sure. I mean, we all have to be aware of the pace of innovation and, I mean, even see that we can maybe promote this going even faster, certainly with regard to scaling up and to implement the use of technologies. I mean, this is, you know, in the last few years, I have been on the jury of the Hilton Foundation Prize, which has been interesting because every year we get 15 candidates picked from across the world who has made the most important impact on humanitarian improvements, you know, has made a difference, innovative, and also reaching many people's lives. And a couple of years, 3 years ago, I guess, I pushed hard in that jury to give the prize to PATH, which is an institution in Seattle that for 40 years or more has been working hard to deliver, to help promote and to make innovations, technology in the technology field that can improve health. And then Gates comes along and uses PATH experience and gets, you know, the conviction that the scaling up and the moving the change, both in health and education, by the way, by Gates, can build on some of those principles of you look for simple technologies that can be easily transferred and used in poorer countries, and not just, you know, think about the types of technologies that we like to use in the Western world and in the industrialized countries. Yeah. Now, it just illustrates, I think, that innovation, research, new ways of thinking is so essential, and everyone who is in any field should be thinking in those terms.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Now we're going to give the gifts to each one of you. Thank you for your participation here as we have been asking questions. This is a token of our appreciation. This is for you, madam, and this is you. Yes, I'm taking the audience now. So at least I've done my bit, and now the audience will do their bit, okay? The audience will now be allowed to ask questions. We have had from Mr. Andrew Young. Would you like to comment? There was somebody, no, you refrain from that. Okay, very good. There is one person, a gentleman there, down there, please. Is there a microphone coming up here?
Hello, my name is Christian Brønning-Tønnesen. I'm heading Statkraft, who is Europe's largest company in producing renewable energy. And we are also developing hydropower in several regions of the world. We just heard Kofi Annan stating that greening up the economy will be as important as the Industrial Revolution. And Ted Turner speaking about the need for stop burning fossil fuels and wood. It's easy to agree to those statements. My question goes, what forces globally would bring us there? A new coal-fired plant is put on the grid every week. And it's not so easy to see the way from this ambition into this new ambitious reality. So what forces could bring us there? Thank you.
Yes, Kofi Annan, briefly, please.
No, I think you have several forces that will have to be at work. First of all, we need to invest much more in research than we are doing at the moment. And that investment is not only at the governmental level, but at the corporate level. Corporations like yours can direct its investments and its research in a manner that will lead us towards that goal. We can also see a situation where population and individuals are going to put pressure on corporations to move in the right direction. I think what is important is that the political leaders do not come up with the right decisions, the right criteria, the right demands. The people will have to make sure they move the environmental issue higher up the political agenda and put pressure on the leaders to do the right thing. But that pressure would also affect the corporations. People as individuals have power. Sometimes they don't realize it. They have power in the choices they make, which companies they decide to support, which products they decide to buy or not to buy. And as people become more aware of the environmental dangers, they are going to make much more enlightened choices, which would also put greater pressure on us. And I would also hope that part of that pressure will be to encourage corporations and others that if they come up with greener technology, that they adjust their intellectual property requirements so that it can be transferred much more easily to the developing and the poorer countries so that the whole world can benefit and we don't become short-sighted, chasing profits at the expense of the globe.
Thank you very much. We many hands up here now. We've run out of time. Time has gone very, very quickly in good company. There is a lady further back there, so that we have an equal distribution. She stands up. She'll have a microphone. Brief question, please.
Thank you very much. My name's Jasmine Whitbread from Save the Children. I really appreciate the panel's positive perspective on the progress that's been made to date and the opportunities ahead. And I think we see that even last week at the Gavi pledging conference, where amazingly the target for the amounts of pledges towards new vaccines and rolling out existing vaccines was actually beaten. And my question would be, building on all of that optimism and the progress that's been made, one of the gaps that was identified in Ban Ki-moon's strategy, Every Woman, Every Child, was around the number of trained health workers around the world in these developing countries, because these vaccines and other technological innovations don't inject themselves. We do need to see that investment in trained health workers. So my question would be to the panel, what kind of private-public partnerships would you see are going to be essential between the types of organizations who are represented in the room today that could result in more and better trained health workers to save the lives of those millions of children? Thank you.
Dr. Brundtland first, please.
Well, you know, this one is a difficult question because we are building alliances, you know, in the areas linked to this. And the question is, what of the existing alliances, you know, should take on this part of it? Or are there new alliances, even than the ones we have, that need to be built to focus on that? Because I think today, so many more countries, because of many actors, civil society, WHO, a lot of institutions have been focusing on this for years now, the importance of it. So where I have to tell you, I don't know every detail about where we are now on pursuing that issue. So whether we need a new and additional partnerships or building on existing ones, I have to ask Tore Godal or others to give a good answer to that now.
And Tore Godal, he will be around for the mingling and the dinner afterwards, so he'll be able to speak to you then, I'm afraid, yes. We are running out of time. Kofi Annan, you want to add something to what Dr. Brundtland said? No.
No, not
very
really.
good. As I said, we are running out of time, but there will be an opportunity for each one of you afterwards to meet with the panelists at our dinner because we're closing up now.